David Chislett, good afternoon. What do you say? Good morning, good evening,
Afternoon,
good
wherever you are in
afternoon.
the world.
There we
It
are.
was,
Which is fast becoming, um, it's becoming a thing because
yeah.
I've watched a number of your podcasts of what are you sitting on at the moment, podcast wise? It must be in the 30s or 40s.
No, it's 20 interviews.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
But
Of my
over
own podcast. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but you've so not quite prolific, but but yeah, you're a man who wears many hats, and I'm not going to ask you to regurgitate your bio because that's all freely available on, I think, in pretty much most of those wonderful interviews that I spent a lot of time on more recently. All of that stuff's in there. So of the many hats that you have worn in your life, from being a musician to now being an active commercial poet to being a keynote speaker to being a trainer to being so many things to so many people, um, which of those hats fits you best, in your opinion?
Well, what I'm coming to realizing is that I spent a lot of time collecting the material to make one hat, which is the one I'm currently wearing. And without all of the things and the steps that I had taken in the past leading up until this point in time, I would not have this hat. So I guess it's just a way of saying that I'm pretty sure that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And where that is helping people to get in touch with their creativity so they can live more fulfilled lives and reach their potential.
So I get a sense that you didn't necessarily um, spot a gap in the market. You
No,
created a market. You did create a market in the gap, because I get a sense that certainly when you started out, there was a lot of confusion or even or lack of understanding as to the point of it. I remember thinking way back in the beginning that how could somebody possibly make a living out of doing this, because it didn't seem tangible to me, if that's the right term.
yeah. I did think I'd spotted a gap in the market. And once I dived into that gap, I realized that in actual fact, there were several other people who'd been there a lot longer than me and had published loads of books and been doing it for a very long time. Which just reinforces the breadth and the depth of the issue around our capacity to be creative and how our society deals with it or chooses not to deal with it, to be more accurate. It's a massively needed capacity that needs to be developed for us to survive all of the challenges that we face. And yet, yeah, your impression was the same as mine. It's like, oh, here's a gap in the market. No one's doing this. And actual fact, there's tons of people who are very involved in this field, but the kind of zeitgeist hasn't quite twigged onto the fact that we are all creative and it's just a matter of figuring out for yourself how your creativity works so that you could do more of it.
Okay. So when you discovered that there were all of these people already doing this, as you put it,
Yeah.
um, there would have been a moment of trepidation of like, okay, well, it's oversubscribed, so let me move
Yeah.
on. And yet you didn't.
Yeah.
What was the motivation?
Well, it was a bit like studying literature at university and still wanting to be a poet. There's you can't hope to compete with the established masters. So you're left with two choices: give up and run away and do something else, or do what you do in the way that you do it, regardless. And I'm not a professor. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a neuroscientist. But what I am is an active creative person who has been actually for a very long time and who's worked with a lot of other creatives. And so what I mainly do actually is kind of bring a lot of these disparate thoughts and theories and researches together and try to distill the most simple truths out of them to make them available to more people.
Hmm.
So I'm not trying to pretend that I'm Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi or David Eagleman or any one of these renowned and highly qualified experts on creativity. But I'm someone who understands that material, has practical working experience of it, and is kind of trying to bring that to a wider audience through my own work.
And and obviously, having done this now for a number of years, you've seen, and obviously by virtue of the fact that you were in business, is that as the second that people understand what it is that you can bring, which I think is, it's not something that you can necessarily do in an elevator pitch.
I've tried.
But there clearly seems to be, and maybe it's, I don't know, post-pandemic or even pre-pandemic, where there's this kind of urgency in people to not keep doing what they've always done and finding ways to reinvent or reimagine themselves and also the businesses that they work in.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic has caused a seismic change in attitudes towards work and where and how it should take place. And definitely, if I reflect on my experiences pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, people are a lot more open. But I do still face the fundamental challenge of people not really seeing the value in what I am talking about when I say, hey, I want you to be more creative. I still haven't quite got the hook that gets me in the front door. Once I manage to get myself in through the front door, give me 2 minutes and I've got people. But I'm still trying to figure out that little golden hook to really just snag people and say, oh yeah, that's exactly what we need. But despite the fact that things are changing fast and that everybody, I think, kind of realizes that in essence, we need to change the way we're doing many, many things on this planet, there's still massive resistance to change. People have all sorts of bundled up reasons for not wanting to change. And, people are not stupid. They realize that if you're going to be creative, that implies changing stuff. And that's not really what everyone wants.
But is it not that you're not selling change, you're selling innovation, in the sense it's a shift in thinking, a shift in approach, or even the acceptance of the possibility that we all have creativity in all of us?
Well, yes, but that's on the proactive side, right? So you can basically either be the victim of change, you can anticipate change, or you can make change. What is inescapable is change. And I think most people would, the being the author of the change part is a little bit uncomfortable. And so, yes, what I'm really trying to do is to help equip people with tools to deal better with the changes which inevitably will take place in their lives.
And so much of what you present is innate. It's already in them. They just haven't realized it.
Correct. I mean, everyone's solved a problem before. Everyone's had one good idea. Everyone's had a fantasy or a 5-year plan. All of those things involve what we now understand as creativity, activation of 3 specific areas of the brain in order to engage with a reality that does not yet exist.
And I think so much of what you do is that you initiate triggers with each audience that you sit with, where, as I say, you're not necessarily giving them the textbook or the rule book. You are literally reminding them, or even just welcoming in things that they already carry with them every single day.
And maybe even more importantly, I spend a lot of time myth busting, that you don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be a tortured soul, you don't have to be some kind of super special individual in order to be creative. And that the conflation of art and creativity is a false one. And that in actual fact, creativity is the source and art is merely a product of that function, much in the same way as innovation is that you were just mentioning.
What's in it for you?
A sense of purpose and fulfillment, a constantly challenging and changing environment where I'm forced to learn a lot all the time and to practice what I preach. And I think, for the first time in my life, really being engaged in something that I totally and utterly believe in.
And it shows. I think, again, just reflecting on the interviews that you have done to date, is that a lot of these people, very senior, very specialist practitioners, what I found remarkable was just you could see these kind of eureka moments where they are, to your very popular term, joining the dots,
Yeah.
which which was lovely. It is lovely to see, because I think, as you 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 point out that you're not a specialist in any particular area. You're grossly generalist, but
Mm.
collectively, you are able to elicit something in people, and you kind of change their gear, if and have them approach themselves and their own challenges in a new way.
Well, that's the ultimate objective every time. Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yes. Ask.
you have kind of answered the earlier question, well, the question I wanted to ask now, but from the time that you've started to where you are now, I do get a sense that there's definitely more general knowledge, or a greater understanding or willingness to embrace and accept that we are all fundamentally creative. You mentioned the hurdles that you still have to overcome,
Mm.
but do you think that there is, generally speaking, that people are more open to it, not from a desperation perspective, because, as you say, the world is in a fraught state, and people are looking for answers, but what you offer is one of the many ways that someone who's been in business for a number of years, grown a business to a certain size, and then looking to obviously change it up, the number of industries that you talk to is diverse, or are diverse, um, but there does seem to be a growing curiosity, because you're not a tarot reader, you're not, but yet
Yeah.
I think there is some weird expectation from certain sectors where you are expected to come in and you're going to reimagine their whole world. Yet the point is for them to do the heavy lifting. You are
Yeah.
really just the guide.
Yeah. Exactly. I think what the pandemic did change for a lot of people is the realization that not only could they change, but they actually quite enjoyed changing, and that change was empowering.
Mm.
And that once they were able to work from home and set their work hours and set up their work environment exactly as they liked, that they were more productive, which made them more fulfilled, which made them happier. And I think a lot of light bulbs went on through that kind of sequence of events where a lot of people were like, wait a second, I don't need this nonsense of the way that I was being managed or handled. And, we've all seen loads about the great resignation. I mean, whether that was even actually a thing or not is another debate for another day. But I think what a lot of people did realize was that our assumptions about the way things had to work were false. You know, I think pretty much everyone accepted the wisdom that there was no way that everybody could work remotely, because people would just be too demotivated, too distracted, would never get their stuff together, and work wouldn't be done. And the polar opposite was proved to be true during the pandemic.
Mm.
And I think that has made a lot of people go, well, what else am I assuming about my life and my work that's actually complete flim-flam? And yeah, so therefore people are a little more open to engaging with the idea that, hey, let's do some thought experiments and upside down a few of our other preconceptions and see what falls out.
So then, would you not label it, if you had to label it, the Great Reset? Was that not the Great Reset?
I'm not answering that question using those words.
No, I mean it. I mean it from the point of view is that COVID was a terrible time for, obviously, for a great many people on so many levels. But what it did do was talk to the thing that you just said, that so many realizations that up to that point had not been realized. It was the ultimate campaign
I
for
think
what to
I
do.
think more what happened is that the democratizing potential of the digital world uh, finally got a living example for people to refer to, and that the authority and the power of in particular middle management was completely usurped and upstaged, and that the promise and the potential of the individual was brought to the fore. I would not call that a great reset, rather more than an object demonstration of how much time and money and effort we've been wasting for decades by insisting that people are idiots who can only do their work if they are highly monitored and controlled by people who've done a specific kind of qualification at a specific school. Um, you know, I'm very wary of the Great Reset because of the extreme right-wing nonsense that has unfortunately attached itself to that phrase. But what certainly has occurred is that it has empowered the average person to question the way things are being done.
And I think, without, as you say, to what's been attached to it, and it really is just the term, but I do think that there has been a recalibration for each and every person in the world, because each and every person was affected in some way by virtue of. So in order to be able to then take the next step and to be equipped in a world where there is no rule book, you are one of those people who are helping people with their stuff that they've got with them, that yes, the highly qualified or those that are not, but what you come with in the world, that's kind of, there is now, I think, a greater need for the likes of you in this space to be able to equip people and help them, right?
Yeah, I think creativity is power, because when you can make stuff, that means you can influence your environment, which means you can generate more options for yourself, which gives you greater freedom of choice. And I just read a really nice description in a friend of mine's newsletter, Cliff Goldmacher. He's actually one of the people I interviewed on my podcast, where he quoted this really nice sort of state of mind about creativity, where you need to be macro patient and micro impatient. And the idea being that you've got to be really macro patient about the big picture, about the long term. But it's very important to be micro impatient about the smaller steps, about learning stuff and joining the dots and putting the little pieces together. Because quite often the big picture is not apparent when you start. And I think traditionally we're told that it should be, that you have to have the goal, the grand vision, and then you start assembling the bits and pieces. But in actual fact, by internalizing the bits and pieces, by being micro impatient and getting out there and engaging, the big picture starts to emerge. And what I like so much about that particular description is that it clears up an issue which I've had before, which is it's quite easy as a white, middle-aged, middle-class, Western European human being to say that creativity gives you control, gives you freedom. Because obviously you've got your hands somewhere to some degree on the levers of power, of influence and of access. Whereas if you're in a township in somewhere like South Africa, that sounds like a bit of a false comfort. But if you are micro impatient and you just take every single step that you possibly can to acquire as many bits and pieces as possible and allow the image, the picture, the process to emerge in time, and you are macro patient, yes, the road from A to B and finally to Z will possibly be, or probably be, a lot longer than for somebody who has access to stuff. But the logic is inescapable. It will still happen.
And no part of it can never be seen as failure. You'll never fail as long as you try.
Correct. As long as you keep going,
yes.
As long as you keep going to the next step, being impatient about what next, how can I get better, what did I do wrong, what else can I pick up, the bigger picture will emerge.
So appetite.
I really like that quote. That's a really nice thought. It's a very empowering way of looking at the world.
In all of the time that you've been doing the work that you're doing now, is there any single client or individual that you've worked with where they've really embraced what you shared with them to the point that you could almost share it as testimonial to go, here was person X when I first met them and this is where they are now? You can't claim it all, of course, but yes.
No. Well, that's what's so interesting about this, right? Because one little light bulb moment has a lot of unforeseen consequences. And so there are a couple of people I can think of who, we had some pretty intense conversations around stuff, or they attended a workshop, who later have gone home and completely changed their entire plan and their entire business model, which has taken them in a completely different direction. And I think if there's anything that's important about creativity, it's the ability to do that kind of thing. Is to let go of your judgment and your opinion of what is good and bad, especially when it's your own stuff. It's really difficult to let go of stuff that, in your opinion, is good and right, and this is going to work. And not from an egotistical point of view, but just this is where you've arrived at. This is what you've worked out. And then someone comes along and drops a mind bomb on you. The ability to go, "Ooh, wait a second, that changes everything." That's what's so challenging sometimes about creativity, is to release the judgment and to reassess and regroup and go further. And so anyone I've ever worked with who has taken benefit away from our sessions have always been people who've been able to do that more easily than others.
Yeah, because it is, I think the higher up the chain you go, the harder it is to convince those people to embrace that way of thinking, because as we were saying earlier, is that there's a fear of loss of control, because so many people have the perception that they are in control. The reality is that they're not. But
Yep.
You put this in front of them and it's like, oh, we don't want people thinking for themselves. Oh, no, heaven forbid, what would happen? The world would go mad. Yet the benefit, if you're a manager and you're promoting that down, down the line, the benefit to the business is extraordinary.
It's exponential.
Yes, exponential.
If you think about it, your average organization has probably got 5% of their staff actively thinking forward, thinking creatively. Can you imagine if they found a way to access the inherent creativity of the other 95%?
Yeah.
How much easier and faster would it be to change and adapt to changing market situations?
David, you just published your your third collection of poetry. How's that been received?
Well, I must say I did a bit of a stealth release with the poetry.
Yeah, like everything you do.
Well, I'm fond of making a song and dance of things as well, but this one was very much kind of, I got the book out and I just pressed the button and it was there out in the world. Right. I still need to actually exert a lot more effort in letting people know that it exists. But so far so good. I've had pretty good reactions to it. It's for me, it was a very important book to release because it fills a gap in between the previous two books that probably nobody else. Well, yeah, I guess so. But literally in that, the first book released in 2010 was generated through a Facebook project, and the second book was generated through a Patreon project. And it's like I didn't write any other poetry between those two projects, which just isn't true. And that's what's in the book that's just come out now. That's what's in B-sides. So it was a sort of almost like a retrospective exercise to say, hey, hang on a second, I don't only do social media projects. Here's the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, and that, I think if you put the three together, it does. It's a perfect perfect triangle, and well, a trilogy of sorts, one could say.
Well, the one thing I learned from publishing poetry is that what I think about my poetry is a completely worthless waste of breath. So if other people begin to draw that conclusion, I would be very happy. I mean, there's a nice roundness or completeness to that.
Yeah,
I think what definitely is true is that I write in bursts.
Yes.
And the beginning of each burst generally involves some kind of a change in my voice and style. And so I would be intrigued if people could actually see that from, for you or someone like you, to B-sides, to With All of You, to actually track that change in voice. I don't really have an opinion on that. I'm not sure if I could say for certain if that was true or not.
Which I like. I like the fact that you can't. And because again, I think that's the beauty, as you say, you cannot be your own critic. You can't judge what you do. And you've said it in many of your interviews as well, is that it's the affirmation or the confirmation will come from others. You are there to deliver the work, and as you do with all of the work that you do, the keynote speaking, the training through to the creative stuff, that your affirmation comes from your audience, not from you, which I respect that. Yeah. So what's next?
Well, next year, I am definitely putting my ideation canvas out into the world. I don't know if anyone listening is aware of the whole canvas sort of methodology. It's something I think that comes out of design thinking. So there's the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas and all these kinds of things. And I've developed one that'll help you develop your own ideas called the ideation canvas. So I'll be pushing that out into the world. And I will be taking the video podcast interview things that I've been doing on YouTube and stripping out the audio of those and then recording reflection episodes on each interview and then releasing all of that episode by episode onto traditional podcast platforms as an actual audio podcast. So those are my two biggies. I'm still threatening to write a book about like a user's handbook for creativity called Rebel, Reject, Create.
Great title.
But I have kind of been muttering about that for 2 years now, and to be honest with you, I'm no further than when I first started muttering about it. But next year might be the year. I'm starting to feel like the idea is coalescing into something, so it should happen fairly soon.
So much of it's already written. You just need to write it down.
Yeah, I think what I don't want to do is write a book about creativity. Like, what I want to do is put together a practical guide, a user book, a workbook for people that is actually of direct day-to-day practical use. So it's a little more complicated than just writing it all down. It's also figuring out what sort of methodology to use to present it in an interactive, practical, usable way.
Yes. Yeah, I do think it'll be a multimedia project ultimately.
Well, as they all are all of a sudden.
Well, you'll get one part and then you'll plug into another part, and then you'll get a package in the post with and things to blow up. But but it sounds exciting and creative as always. What I love about your work is that you never rest on any aspect. You're continually challenging yourself. You can, in the same way that you challenge your audiences. But your curiosity is the thing that I find most infectious. And I think if anyone has been to any class of yours or listened or watched in any of your interviews, that to me is the thing that in each one I get a sense of that genuine passion. To one of the earlier questions that I asked around, you find yourself at this stage of your life having done a great many things, but I definitely get a sense that what you are doing, call it a calling, but you are genuinely passionate about this curiosity that you have and your investment in empowering and improving people's lives.
Yeah. And, thank you, first of all. If you told me 5 years ago that what I would end up be doing was all about helping other people, I probably would have burst out laughing and rolled around on the floor. It still feels somewhat uncomfortable to me to even say those words, but I can't deny the history. If I look back at everything that I've always done, that's what it's always been about. I mean, that's what you do as a band manager, as a music critic, as a promoter, when you're doing PR. I mean, you're furthering the creative agendas of other people. That's the purpose of your existence. And it was only when I really figured that out that I suddenly went, oh, okay, I'm happy enough to talk about helping people now. I had to first realize that I was already doing it before I was happy to put that sticker on it. But yeah, that is what it is.
And I think certainly in my case, I'm far better at promoting other people than I am myself. So I think for someone like yourself, you are your business, yeah, it seems it's unnatural for you to be seen to be promoting yourself, which the fact that you have that realization that actually it's, I don't know whether it's a case of feeling worthy, or I don't know, or it's an interesting one, but
Yeah.
yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, and don't change. Well, do change everything quite often, because that's what you do. But yeah, please keep doing what you're doing, and having you there, um, I think rebelling, rejecting, and creating, yeah, you're a force of nature. So
Thank you, Jason.